Morning guys, it's the Swordfish once again with some more Hearthstone gameplay. This is a deck explanation video for the Aggro Warrior, and it will be the last deck explanation video or deck construction video I make before the update. And as you can see, I already have an Ice Mage as well, because in the update I probably have some Death Rattle deck which I want to show off. Anyway, I am a big fan of the Mage, and I already have the Ice Mage. This is the old Paladin I showcased, the Zoo deck, obviously the Token Druid, which I think I also showcased, and this very standard, typical Mage which serves for all intents and purposes. Anyway, I already have an Ice Mage, and the Ice Mage has become very popular. Hence why, especially in the lower ranks, it's become very popular, and obviously I haven't played Hearthstone in a while because of the international and whatnot. So I decided to make an Aggro Warrior deck, which is actually, the Warrior is actually a really good counter to the Ice Mage. Why, you might ask? Well, let me explain. The Warrior, especially the Aggro Warrior, the Ice Mage is a deck that relies on a lot of damage, a lot of damage to you quickly, but doesn't really have the best defense mechanisms, especially against the weapon users, such as the Warrior, the Paladin, or the Rogue. The only issue is that Paladins have a really hard time being aggro. I've seen aggro Paladins, but they're not that effective. Rogues can be really, really good, especially the Miracle Rogue, but the Miracle Rogue, if you don't get the right cards, can die easily to the Ice Mage. It follows a similar kind of path, but the Aggro Warrior is a very simple way to attack, not only with weapons, but also with minions, which the minions will be stopped. They're just there to be a nuisance, and whenever you're in dire straits, you can always use the Armor Up ability, so that's really good. So let me explain how this deck works, and I'll do it in a little different way. The way this deck, usually to go top to bottom, explain each card and its use, but this time I'm going to go a little all over the place just to see. You can see the deck, you can copy it if you want to. It's actually I got it off of Hearthstone Arena, and I believe I modified a little bit of it, but I wish I could give credit, but I forgot who I got it off from. I'm not going to lie, it's not my own creation, but this is how I use it essentially. Okay, so let's go first by explaining. Let's start with explaining how much damage this deck actually has, just direct damage. And we're not gonna consider the upgrades here because they're very situational. But we have the 2 Leopard Gnomes, so that's 4 damage. Not even considering the minions' attacks. I mean like direct damage. So that's 4 damage. The 2 Fury War Axes, that's 6. Total, that's 10. 2 Heroic Strikes, that's 18. Then we have the Mortal Strikes, which consider that they're the minimum. That's 4 damage. That's 24, plus the Arathi Weaponsmith Weapons, which is 8 more damage, 32, 2 Coconut Elites, 40, 2 Arcanite Reapers, that's 50, 2 Night Blades, which is 56, and the 2 Argent Commanders, which total is 64. Okay, so that's the amount of direct damage you have. That's a lot of direct damage for a deck, to be honest, very aggro-y. And so how does that work? What exactly do you do with this deck? That's also not considering the upgrades, which actually makes the Arcanite Reaper hurt a lot more. It can add a total of up to 14 or 12 if you're unlucky. But anyway, how does this deck work? Essentially, the spells and weapons are the direct damage, even Nightblade on the Leopard Gnomes. But they are really the direct damage dealers. Occasionally, Coconut Elite as well, or maybe the Arathi Weaponsmith Weapons. And the Fury, and the Bloodseal Raider in some cases as well. But it tends to be that the Chargers, even the Argent Commanders, are used to clear out the minions, especially Taunters, to allow yourself to deal a little bit more damage. The minions essentially are there to be a nuisance. You have Argent Squire. Why put an Argent Squire in the deck? It's very easy for aggro. It's a turn 1 minion, which is very hard to deal with, to be honest, because of the stupid Divine Shield. Doesn't deal too much damage, but at the same time, it's just the enemy, especially if they're playing a control deck, really wants to clear this minion out. And he can be the 1 damage that decides if you kill a minion or not. The Leopard Gnome is similar. It's easy to clear out. It's only 1 health, to be honest. It's actually really easy to clear out. But when you destroy it, you deal 2 damage to the enemy, and more importantly, you're taking away a turn from them. You're taking away some sort of spell, which they could use on you, which they're going to use on this Leopard Gnome, or even a Fireball. It's enough. The point of the minions is mostly to stall and to annoy the enemy. Then let's go on to the rest. Fury Dragon is one of those minions that really is the biggest nuisance, because usually the Leopard Gnome or the Argent Squire or even the Bloodseal Raider tend to take damage from spells, and they tend to just be killed with a Frostbolt or maybe a lightning bolt or whatever class you're playing in. Even like what other, maybe a weapon occasionally, but anyway. Fairy dragons are the ones that can only be dealt with weapons and area spells. That means Consecrate, wasted on just a fairy dragon. True Silver Champion might be wasted on a fairy dragon just because he's so hard to kill. Or, ideally, he takes away one of your enemy's minions, which means he's stalled even more. And meanwhile, the 3 attack is actually quite decent. You can probably get 2 of those in, maybe 6 damage. I tend to do 6 damage with a fairy dragon, mostly. Sometimes only 3, because I need to deal with a minion first. But he is very hard to deal with and stays on the board for quite a while if you know how to use him, if you use him in a proper scenario, and tends to be a nuisance and really good at stalling the enemy. The Bloodsail Raider has a very similar effect to the Fairy Dragon in the sense that he can be cleared by spells, but he has to be cleared by spells. He is an immediate threat. He's quite the opposite of the Fairy Dragon, actually. The Fairy Dragon is something that you need to clear out at some point, and you need to really kill. Sorry about what I said. I contradicted myself. But yeah, the Fairy Dragon is something that you need to kill immediately. You need to kill at some point. But you really don't want it dealing constant damage on the board. The Bloodsail Raider, especially if you get it off with a nice little Fury War Axe or a Knight Reaper, can be a real damage dealer. So, the enemy will want to clear this out almost always. And he's not there, honestly, unless you summon him as a 2-3. He's really not there to deal damage. He's only there to force the enemy into using a bunch of spells, which might be used for better things on this Bloodsail Raider. And, meanwhile you deal damage with your weapons and stuff. Now, the Frothing Berserkers serve a really similar purpose to the Bloodsail Raider. This time I'm not going to contradict myself. If you decide to attack him with spells, and most spells in the early game only deal up to 3 damage, so the 4 health is really nice. But if you decide to attack him with minions that are not, a 4-3 or something of the sort, you will lose the minion, most likely, and more importantly, you will have to deal with this guy immediately. This guy is kind of like a knife juggler. He is a threat, immediate threat, and he's actually not that easy to take out because of his 4 health. So, this guy serves to stall the game even further, and in some cases deal a considerable amount of damage to his high health. As opposed to the Bloodsail Raider, which can be taken out by most spells, the Frothing Berserker is a little harder to take out, and in some cases will actually be able to deal some damage to the enemy. And you can also play him in a really good play, like say you're going to sacrifice Sergeant Squire, Leopard Gnome, and Fairy Dragon. You play the Frothing Berserker, because you tend to have that by turn 3, honestly, if you have a Calling, something of the sort. Or turn 4, rather. Maybe. I don't know, depends on the case. But you can summon the Frothing Berserker and make him a real immediate threat, which your opponent has to deal with as soon as possible. Now, the Harvest Golem is something he's more towards the Fairy Dragon side. He is hard to deal with immediately. Actually, more like the Argent Squire. He's hard to deal with immediately because of his stupid death rattle. And he also can take out a considerable amount of your enemy's minions, even though he's a turn 3 minion. So he can really stall very well. And that 2 damage is not that great, but also not negligible. Now, the Arathi Weaponsmith, his weapon can be used, her weapon, rather, it's kind of creepy. Her weapon can be used for direct damage, though shouldn't. More importantly, it can be used to clear out annoying minions that might have some special effects, such as Knife Juggler or maybe a Young Priestess, something like that really cannot stay on the board. Even like a Weaponsmith, for example. You don't want them to stay on the board for long, so you send out the Arathi Weaponsmith and whatever the guy that gives 1 damage to other minions. They're not common, but these minions that have really strong effects, but not such a strong attack. Or anything like a Kobold Geomancer, for example, the spell damage extra, it's really annoying. Some of the Arathi Weaponsmith, you get a 3-3 on the board, which is very decent, and the 2-2 can deal with the minion easily. It's not really meant for direct damage, but the minion can really deal a lot of direct damage if left alone, because it tends to be the Arathi Weaponsmith tends to be left alone just because he's not that strong as opposed to other minions you have, which are much more annoying. The Korkron Elite is mostly to deal with Taunters, except for the Tusk Dingo. He can deal with most Taunters easily, and even stay alive in some cases, and can save your life if you need direct damage. Pretty much it. Now, finally, the Argent Commander is to deal with big-ass minions if necessary, or, more importantly, to deal direct damage in some cases, and still have the Divine Shield, meaning he's not easy to deal with. Even though he has 2 health, you need at least 2 attacks to deal with him. And in some cases where your opponent might not have any cards, that's very annoying. Oh, finally, the Nightblade, by the way. 4-4, decent minion, very decent minion, in fact. And the 3 damage might be the last bit of damage you need. you need to kill your enemy hero. And more importantly, this 3 damage goes through taunters, which is the big, the big counter to this deck, taunters. Okay, now talking about the cards, we're going to go for your War Axe first instead of Upgrade. Upgrade is mostly used for the Arcanite Reaper. It's the ideal situation. You use the Arcanite Reaper and deal a shit ton of damage. You deal up to 18 damage just with 1 upgrade, up to 28 with 2 upgrades. So, it's really amazing. In some cases, it can be used as a weapon. It can be to deal with something like a Zoo Lock or something of the sort. That's very possible. But, it's very situational. Depends on what you want to use it in, to be honest. It's very, very useful. Fury War Axe is mainly meant to deal with the early game minions, so your opponent isn't like snowball out of control. But it could be direct damage if you get it in the late game and you combine with something like a Heroic Strike. Another great thing about the Fury War Axe is that combined with the Heroic Strike can deal with almost all minions. So that means 7 damage is a considerable amount. And the Heroic Strike here is mainly to deal with taunters or very big minions that will be very scary, such as the Ragnaros, for example. Though this wouldn't be enough, but most big minions, I said. But something that you really don't want to deal with, you want to deal with immediately before they deal a lot of damage, even like a War Golem or a Garul, even in some cases. But it can also be used as a finisher for more direct damage. The Mortal Strike can be used as a finisher because 4 damage is actually pretty decent. But if you go below 12 health, which is likely if you are using this Fury War Axe or Heroic Strike to clear out minions, you eventually just deal 6 damage instead, and that's actually a lot of damage. Combine that with Arcanite Reaper, and you only need, Arcanite Reaper upgraded plus 2 Mortal Strikes is already death. So, just think about that. The Arcanite Reaper is possibly your main source. It's gonna be your main source of damage. Is the final card I'm gonna talk about, and it's the most important card on the deck. I could be using the Gorehowl, but I really don't like Gorehowl in this deck, to be honest. I think the Arcanite Reaper is much more effective, especially with the upgrade. It can deal with big taunters if necessary. It can be combined with Heroic Strike to deal a lot of damage to the enemy, or even Mortal Strike to deal also a lot of damage to the enemy. Can deal up to 11 damage if you're not careful. That's a lot, and you really want to show it as your last resort. And also puts your enemies in a defensive position in which they have to deal with the Arcanite Reaper by healing themselves. And even though you won't win the game as quickly, in many cases the Arcanite Reaper will allow you to stall your opponent ever so briefly until you get something like an Argent Commander, or a Mortal Strike, or a Heroic Strike, something of the sort, where you can be full offensive and destroy him. Meanwhile, he's trying to regain health to not be killed by your upgraded Arcanite Reaper. So it's very psychological, in addition to being the main source of damage. 'Cause that's 10 damage, just for one card, that's 5. And you want to use it as soon as possible as well. If you have turn 5 Nightblade or turn 5 Arcanite Reaper, definitely use Arcanite Reaper just to start dealing damage. Mostly used to the face, unless they have a taunter. Mostly used to the face, not to clear out big minions in this case. Use the Fury War Axe if you need to clear out a big minion. Arcanite Reaper should not be used for that, unless in a special situation. And the Wrathy Weaponsmith weapon, I talked about this briefly, but this can also be used to clear out big minions, especially with the combination of Heroic Strike. 2 Heroic Strikes kills everything on the board for a relatively bad weapon. And yeah, that's pretty much, what it's used for. So don't use Arcanite Reaper to clear things out. Okay, so that's the explanation of the deck. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you want to use this deck. And soon to come, the next videos will be after the next Rammus update. So probably will include something along the next Rammus Death Metal's theme. Maybe a Priest deck. I would love to make a Priest deck, but I have none of that right now. Actually, I've made a deck with almost every class except for Priest, and I have a lot of I have a lot of Golden Dust. I'm waiting for an update to see if they change any cards, and I'm gonna get a special Golden Dust. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe, blah blah blah, like, favorite, and link in the description if you've missed a showcase of this video of this deck. I'll make sure that you can watch it. So I'll see you guys next time. Love you guys.